Hello and welcome to your Wednesday evening weirding session. I'm your host, C. Savory, creator of Fractal Praxis. How can I be good to the world? And how can I do good in the world? What does it really mean to be good or to do good through my life? I know I am not the only person listening to this who has asked themselves that. And throughout the entirety of my life, I've been pursuing this question and harvesting different answers depending on how deep I was able to go with the question and my overall sense-making structure at any given time. In this talk, I want to situate the work of fractal praxis in relationship to this inquiry and show how life shines a way to being good and doing good through reintegrating with who and what we are in reality. This is not a unique inquiry. In fact, I think to want to contribute to goodness is a near universal phenomenon in humankind. And perhaps that's because it's reflective of an intuitive layer of reality, a truth so subtle and universal that it's become pre-conscious in us. Pre-consciously, subconsciously, just about all human beings know that this life is a gift. We want to do good because life is good, and we are a part of life. We know we are a part of keeping the gift circulating. This question, how to be good, was a governing pursuit spanning my entire life and has been interpreted in a wide variety of ways depending on my internal sense-making. In childhood, it was about getting good grades to get approval. It was about excelling in school and extracurriculars and appearing moral and dutiful and hardworking to get positive attention, or at the very least, to avoid warranting negative attention. I was very sensitive to moral and ethical questions, socially, environmentally. This was, I can say now, looking back, principally motivated from a place of deep shame and guilt about existing. I had access to a seemingly endless well of self-loathing and anxiety that I think many modern environmental activists listening to this will probably recognize in themselves too. Stemming from a belief system that declared my existence as inherently bad. And so I had a lot of ground to cover in order to make up for that and be good, to try to make up for the debt of good that I owed for existing and for having needs that I shamefully had. For everything that I took from this world, I was obligated to give it back. In my teen years, as I began gaining agency, which is a hugely liberating factor that I talk about at length elsewhere, my anxiety and regret morphed into an identity of energetic activism. I could do something, and that became a source of my motivation to funnel my anxiety at existing into trying to make an impact. I was, as a teenager, the president of my high school's Amnesty International Club, writing letters soliciting the release of political prisoners worldwide, and hosting fun community fundraisers. I threw myself into volunteerism with nonprofits And my first summer job as a teen was interning at the amazing social justice theater company called Heartbeat Ensemble, which used theater of the oppressed techniques to craft plays made from stories from their own local community, until eventually growing disillusioned by the hierarchical structures inherent in the nonprofit industrial complex. And then I saw my inquiry further evolve. In my early 20s, I began diving into a different model of change making: direct action. There was an abundance of anarchist collectives operating in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I was attending college, and fulfilling all kinds of community needs and functions. Direct action simply means community members directly participating and coordinating themselves in an equitable framework to enact the changes in their world that benefit themselves and their neighbors and show solidarity to oppressed people worldwide. For over a decade, then, of a self-made career, I embraced the formation of co-ops, business and organizational co-ops, and cooperativism as an ethic and practice. And this was my primary strategy for making good in the world, using a direct action or self-help model. Quick note, co-ops use the term self-help to mean collective action in furtherance of meeting our own needs. It's not like the psychological self-help genre. And then in the last decade or so, I've seen my answer to this inquiry evolve further, and my efforts to make good have shifted into teaching and facilitating people about systems thinking, permaculture and social permaculture, participation in their local ecosystems and communities, still in a philosophy of direct action, but also oriented towards kind of a pattern-based praxis where we can understand and interpret and navigate all kinds of complexity if we understand that the patterning we are encountering stems from living systems. And I've applied this pattern-based praxis and thinking to my organizational consulting and helping diagnose and address holistic challenges that an organization might face. I've also more recently, been cultivating my presentation in the world as a minister, a person who simply shows up, who channels wisdom and beauty, shows up to what is called for by my relations. And this is an elegant model. It's a relational model, and it's an ancient archetype for just giving, 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 and being of service. So it suits me. But all of this is part of a legacy of just wanting to make the world a better place through my existence. And although I believe this question of how to be good and do good is actually a widely felt motivation that springs from the source within us, and that all people encounter on some level or are living out in their own ways. It's also something that's widely suppressed and distorted within the cultural framework of capitalist, colonialist, supremacist society. It's not a widely held or openly practiced value according to the norms of that cultural system. Because more often than not, under the rules of the capitalist colonialist game, those who do good are exploited for all they're worth. And those who do the exploiting hoard the resources, cutting off the cycle of reciprocity. Generosity is punished, not rewarded, in that game. So, to have committed my life to doing good is perhaps, indeed, countercultural. But it is not counter to the true nature of who and what we are. The thing is, if we look to life, we see that It not only knows goodness, it is goodness. Life has this unique and reflexive knack for fostering its own conditions for thriving. This manifests as ecosystems pursuing to attain what we call a climax state, which refers to the idea of it being a peak state as a desirable state. It's what life moves toward, in which the greatest amount of biodiversity is achieved within the constraints of the relations in the system. More beings means more niches, not fewer. More opportunities for innovation. Life abhors uniformity. Life literally counteracts uniformity and entropy everywhere it can. Life loves living, so by some magical, again, reflexive patterning, it makes its own conditions for having even more chances at living. This is a principle known as autopoiesis, literally translating to self-making, that is a property of living systems. Living systems make their own conditions for themselves to prosper. And in this sense, life has one core impetus, but it manifests that across immense expressions of diversity. It's brilliant. It's elegant. It's full of joy. It's generative. And it is what we are. We are extensions of life. So we are bound to do good and be good if we're permitted to follow our true natures, or so I've come to believe. But first we must, and this is the hard and long part, we must unearth our true natures from layers and layers of traumatic conditioning and accumulated projected identities and assumptions. We must shed all the ill-fitting extraneous ideas and assumptions, and those that are rather energy intensive to maintain and manage due to all the cognitive dissonance they generate. I can't tell you how to do that, and even if I could, it wouldn't matter unless you found the courage and commitment to do it yourself. But I will try to show you, and I'll teach as best I can. I'll share the patterns I've used to completely reorganize myself and my sense-making toward my ultimate liberation. And now, finally, I have the self-made framework for doing so. Fractal praxis. So, how do we be here well? How do we do good? How do we be all right, at least? And how do we be regenerative? If we can make things good, why wouldn't we try and try harder? If things can be better through our very existing, why wouldn't we contribute to that? I feel like on this quest I've been on, I've stared into the belly of the beast more than once, meaning I've basically answered this question to my satisfaction over and over again, each time in more and more depth. And the meaning has evolved. My answer has become more and more fractal and holistic in its articulation and enactment over time. And I'm still not done trying to answer it. But here's what I would say as of today. There's one generalized way to be and do good. Engage with the world. If living systems are self-making and life is good, then the process of living can make life better. And the process of living is a process of cognition, or sense-making, or meaning-making, in other words. Everything I just said is intrinsic to life's design or existence in the universe. No external superimposed effort is required. Life is good to itself. It generates its own conditions for thriving, and we are that. And we need to remember that everything we do and do not do is generating the conditions in which every other being and ourselves exists. We are making our own context. We are our own context. So internalizing the idea of interbeing is valuable. We have to override conditioning that says, here I am, sovereign, separate, solipsistic individual, hero of a story, and the rest of the world is the stage, the backdrop, inert. We must instead we have to move from figure ground seeing to figure seeing, which looks at the world as though it is all interbeing. We are the conditions we create. Our existence, the shape that our existence takes, is enabled by all other beings historically and simultaneously. Why does this reality seem so different, though? Why does it seem distant? Why does it seem that most modern day humans are actively detracting or contributing negatively to our environments? Because we are out of alignment and out of conformity with the truth of ourselves. We lead lifestyles divorced from consequences and divorced from our relations. We therefore don't have the feedback, the contact with life necessary to adjust ourselves. But for as much as we avoid that feedback, we generate karma and we experience cognitive dissonance. Overcoming cognitive dissonance is a key aspect to actually liberating ourselves, something I'll say much more about separately. Attaining right understanding and attaining right relationship are closely braided. It's not that humans are inherently bad. Rather, I believe humans, in spite of ourselves sometimes, are incredible expressions of complexity. And in that sense, we are a reflection of what life wants. But the way that most of us are living, the way, the logic, the lifestyle, the pattern, which is a reflection of the Western world's storying or mythos, that's what's inherently off. And the feedback we are getting, inner cognitive dissonance and outer collapse of ecosystems and widespread oppression and despair in social systems, is just trying to let us know that we are off course. I believe there is an elegant way to re-enter the dialogue of life on this planet, to conform ourselves to the truth rather than to some superficially propped up social standard. But it will take shedding everything we are not, really, and shedding a culture that, if we bind ourselves to it, will bind us to a slow and painful death. I know from firsthand experience that this kind of breakthrough in consciousness can happen radically, spontaneously, even catastrophically, if we're being honest, to our ordinary sense of self. And I invoke this for us now. We need this now, but not to be broken, to be made whole, to be broken open into a way of living, understanding, and synchronizing with our world that allows everything to make a lot more sense, and that allows us to have meaningful participation in bettering the world and leaving a good legacy. What I'm discussing might seem esoteric, but I'm pointing to the subtle architecture of just what is. If you seek, you'll eventually find. It's like the age-old debate about what the Buddha's enlightenment meant. Did the Buddha transcend ordinary existence and enter some special, holy, rarefied realm that the rest of us are mostly locked out of? Or did the Buddha just find a way to be radically whole within being human? Did his trained and expanded mind meet the challenge of actually comprehending the world, and he ended up just as is, but free of cognitive dissonance, free to be and do well, even universally, if you will. Good form makes good outcomes. Good form includes good thinking. includes attaining understandings that reduce friction and harm, i.e., karma, from cycling in our somewhat closed living systems. And the more we sense that we make of things, the more good we generate in general. And generalized principles are relevant. This is something I will spend a whole episode talking about why it's okay to operate from things in general. Anyway, now that I have propped up the appropriate meta-inquiry for what this work is all about, in subsequent episodes, I'm going to be sharing the thinking that led to and are the fruits of crucial insights. So avid was I to learn my way out of the mire and suffering of my youth. I was fortunate in that a few very sound, reliable ideas would become the pillars of my worldview all before the age of 23, which indeed probably led to the major spontaneous spiritual experiences that happened to me starting at age 23, and that would characterize the rest of my 20s, and subsequently reorganize my life and identity many times over. But here's a tease of what's to come. It starts with adopting a really good filter for what not to believe, and having a foundation in your own body-mind as a living system that is trustworthy in its abilities to make sense, to glean universal truths from even the most intense or dynamic lived experiences you undergo. And then to use this foundation to seek ever more extremely elegant explanations for things, which may require stretching mind and language to adequately internalize patterns in the world. I'm really looking forward to getting into this. Thank you so much for listening. To support this work, you can visit fractalpraxis.com to get on the mailing list, or make a donation at fractalpraxis.com/donate. Blessed be.